Hey guys, what's up? So this video is brought to you by Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp. If you guys are trying to get into software development, iOS development, software QA, and other stuff, check out the link in the description tab below. They are offering courses. You can actually live on campus over there. They are hooked up with employers around the country, around the world really, and they're going to help you try to find your first job in this industry. So make sure you give them a look, Dev Mountain Coding Bootcamp, and the link is in the description tab below. Hey guys, what's up? So in this video, you guys are gonna be sitting in the driver's seat. You guys are sitting in shotgun with me. But anyway, in this video, I'm talking about like how I became a programmer and how I learned programming, because this video is talked about like at length on YouTube. But if we're honest here, I'm one of the first ones that was in this industry that actually did this. And a lot of the videos I actually have seen that are out there when people are talking about, oh, I became a developer, this, that, and the other thing. It's like, oh, I went to school for electrical engineering, or like, you know, to be a chemist or something like that, or chemical engineering, and it's like, oh, I switched over to like some sort of Python. I learned to be a coder and things like that. Well, the fact of the matter is that if you have a degree, and no matter what it is, especially if it's some sort of science degree, you're gonna have a much easier time getting a job than if you don't. But in my case, like, I broke into this industry and I basically kicked my way into the door, I would say, because like, I never even took a computer science course at all. I dropped out of community college to get a business administration degree that I still haven't finished. And when I took my first computer science course, it was actually a few years ago. I talked about it on this channel, and basically everything in that introductory course was a complete joke for programming. It's like loops, variables, things like that. And I really think that as a self-taught dev, I'm the first, like, people should really listen to me when I say this, and that's that you could learn all that basic introductory stuff like on YouTube, on Udemy, on Coursera, on any of that stuff, and you can do it for a fraction of the price. Now, as far as development and like, since I didn't actually go to school to become a developer, am I a proponent of boot camps? Even though, obviously I have a coding boot camp that sponsors this channel. I think that they are much more like in tune with the changing web developer technologies for the most part. So any sort of web development, like user experience, quality assurance, things like that, they're going to be more focused on like the latest skills that you need to get into the door. And sorry if I sound a little bit jacked up, I have a cold. But I think a lot of people also wonder about myself, because it's like, well, if you didn't go to computer science, how did you get how did you get your foot in the door? And one of the things that, as I learned how to be a programmer, in this video I'll talk about how I learned and also some of the struggles. But when I was an early adopter, like when I first started getting involved in this stuff, like YouTube wasn't really a thing, but it was starting to make some news. I think Google had it was just looking into acquiring it, like when I was first getting into development. And a lot of that stuff like that was going on with Facebook and even MySpace at the time, like I thought was really exciting for me. Like, web development just seemed like a world of just endless opportunities, and ultimately that's what captured me. But I should also mention the fact that both my grandfather and my father before me are both programmers and have been career programmers. Although they didn't really teach me, my father did kind of give me some pointers and things like that, but nobody was ever looking over my shoulder, looking over my work or anything like that. So when it comes to learning how to program, for me, I mostly stuck with books, and then I also did like a lot of like community stuff. So when I decided that I wanted to build websites, and that's ultimately what got me into this gig, because I attended a rock music website or a concert, and I wanted to build a rock music website from that concert. And it's a longer story than that, but basically I was in a career. I had a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, and I was coming home every day from a career that I didn't really like very much. And I was about 28 or 29. I was 28 at the time, and I just remember that the lead singer of this band that I had attended the concert for was the same age as me, and like, he's touring around the world. And I was just kind of thinking, like, even though he may not be like successful from where he wants to be, like, I wanted to just do something different. And I felt like at the time, like, there was all this, the talk about rock star programmers and shit like that, which is all bullshit, by the way. There's no such thing as really rock star programmers. I mean, they exist to some degree, and you hear about them a lot, and that can actually, I think, creep in the imposter syndrome type of thing. So as a self-taught dev, one of the struggles I had was because there's a difference between knowing what you don't know. Like, so I struggled for a time when I thought I knew everything. I thought like I could read a book and and be able to apply most of the concepts and things like that. So I definitely over exaggerated my skills. So that was a struggle early on. But then as I started realizing I was over exaggerating, that's where the imposter syndrome type of thing starts to creep in too. And imposter syndrome, if you guys aren't familiar, is just simply thinking that you don't belong, or you're like basically in a in a class of people that you're not supposed to be involved with, or you're doing work that you're just not capable of, things like that. So you start having this self-doubt that creeps in, and I think that is actually normal for a lot of developers to experience that, and I definitely did as a self-taught dev. But you're even more susceptible to that as a self-taught dev, because one of the things that you will struggle with this industry is that a lot of the math concepts and things that creep into computer science, because it's very intertwined. So you're going to hear people like myself that say you don't have to be a great mathematician to even build games these days anymore. You can just use Unity engine. A lot of the physics and real complicated math has already been figured out for you, but it still takes a fairly decent amount of math. But that whole not having the proper theoretical computer science background, or even the advanced math background. For instance, I really didn't take advanced math concepts in high school. I graduated high school, but I was a real mess up in high school. Like I got into fights. I was doing stuff I wasn't supposed to do. I had to go to night school to kind of finish the last second, because I was living with my girlfriend at the time. Actually, I was 17 and not even living at home. But basically, I was able to graduate, but I did miss a lot of those core concepts of math and things like that. So the good news is with in this day and age, is like all these websites that are out there, like even from Khan Academy to other things like that, or even math.com will just teach you basically everything you need to know, because you're going to forget stuff, right? So if you're not using those mathematical concepts every day in and day out, then you're going to forget stuff. And ultimately, that's where my struggles with math come in. It's not like I've ever had to hear something 10 times and be like, oh, I still just don't get it. I think that's probably happened, but for the most part, that's not my struggles with math. My math struggles was just simply not learning how to properly break the problem down and solve it the right way, right? Because you have a set of rules and things, and that algorithms follow, and certain calculations have to come before others and things like that, obviously. So, but when it comes to theoretical computer science, and just even things like expression statements, lambda, little things like that, right? Anonymous functions. A lot of those things do come from math concepts that if you don't have that, then you can end up struggling. So I think that as one of the biggest and most beneficial things for me when I was getting started, though, is that I was actually involving myself in development communities pretty early on. So I was pretty involved in Django when it was first getting started. Not when it was first getting started, but the first couple years it came out, I was a pretty early adopter, and I really loved it and everything. But Web2Py was another web framework for Python that I was really involved in. So Massimo Di Piero, he's a friend of mine on Facebook even now, after years of really not talking to him. But he was a professor at a college in Chicago, and anyway, I just being involved in that community, there was a few people, Bruno over there, and just being able to work with other programmers was some of the best experience that I was able to get, because once you get your first job as a developer in the industry, that's when you're really going to realize you don't know shit. You really don't. There's all these different things you have to come to grasp with. And one of the things I definitely struggled with as a developer is working with other developers. So there's proper, effective communication between developers. That is just something that you're going to learn on the job, and you can't really learn it from books. There's not getting frustrated at yourself for not knowing certain things. As a self-taught developer, there were times that I worked too much. That was one of my biggest struggles, is that I worked too much. There's only a certain amount of learning you can possibly do in a day before you really start burning yourself out. And you're probably not doing yourself any favors. You're actually wasting time from doing other things that would probably be able to recharge your brain a little bit faster. And those are things that I definitely struggle with, because I worked full-time, and I had a wife and 2 kids and a mortgage and dog and family life and things like that. And I did my best to come home and then find time to be able to study after doing a completely unrelated field day in and day out. So my struggles were real. I think a lot of people watch this channel that know me, because they know I kicked my way into this industry for sure. I kicked the door down, because there were definitely people along the way that told me I wasn't gonna be able to do it. I had job interviews where I built apps and they didn't even look at the app in the job interview. I talked about that on this channel. I didn't let none of that stuff get me down. Perseverance is the biggest thing with learning programming. Perseverance and dedication. So you're not going to learn anything overnight. You're not going to be an expert at any of this stuff overnight. You're not going to be an expert in this stuff over multiple years, really. So if the quicker you come to terms with that, the better you'll be. But at the same time, you also don't want that imposter syndrome to creep into the point where it's affecting your work and your confidence and things like that, of of knowing what you can and can't do. So I guess there's a fine line between being, having imposter syndrome and then being an arrogant asshole, because there's few people, I think, in this industry that can be truly arrogant assholes. And that's another thing I struggle with as well as a programmer. Everybody has opinions, right? And there's this phrase I heard it as a kid. Like, it's really a terrible phrase. I've always thought it was terrible, but it's basically the phrase is opinions are like assholes, right? Everybody has them, and most of them stink, right? So that is what programming is as well. People are very, very passionate because nobody wants to admit, oh, I spent 2 years learning a technology that's never going to pay any money, and really, I probably wasted my entire time because I could have spent that 2 years doing something else. For instance, like, so why do people watch me? Well, I think for a lot of people have gotten motivation from me because I literally came from nothing and I was able to basically make a lot of money in this industry, not as just a full-time developer, but I mean, I've made a lot of money on this YouTube channel. Like, this YouTube channel is related to the programming and everything, and it's just, that is one of the best things about programming, in my opinion, is that the possibilities are endless. And I saw that a long time ago. I saw it years ago, even with like YouTube and talking to other people. I was like, you know what, I saw an opportunity there, and obviously I capitalized on that. I saw an opportunity to become a developer, and I capitalized on that. I mean, this is one of the few industries, I think, that exists in this day and age where you could truly, the sky is the limit, and you don't have to have a piece of paper to say, hey, this paper tells me that I'm legally allowed to be a programmer. Unlike being a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. Now, eventually that might change, and even today, like, it still is a problem, because I would say probably 40% of all developers are self-taught in some regard. And when I say self-taught, that probably includes people that have unrelated degrees that have transferred into like a STEM field. But yeah, anyway, that's just all kinds of struggles. So I think in this day and age, for anybody that's following my channel, I've said before, you should have a GitHub account. If you're trying to get your job in this industry, if you're not going to school at all, like, you obviously need to learn the basics of some sort of programming language. I mean, I would pick one or two and just stick with that, like Python and JavaScript probably, or maybe an object-oriented thing like C# or Java, and replace that with Python maybe if you wanted to, although Python's going to be easier to get started with. But then from there, like, for me, like, I had to have personal projects. So I had to have, those personal projects were the goals that, and they were ultimately like, it was a goal that consisted of, 500 puzzle pieces, right? And each puzzle piece was a challenge. And I actually had a lot of satisfaction out of, solving those individual pieces and then being able to connect them all together. And as things started connecting together in my brain and making sense, like, ultimately the projects became more and more advanced. But you have to start with something very, very basic. And some of my most basic starter programs were just these console apps that you had to ask questions to, and it was just a constant loop of just, you said this and that, and it did this and that. And then I did like bash scripts where it was like, not really bash scripts, but also like console type app scripts where you take in command line arguments to do some sort of automation task of like checking emails or basically scraping data, writing data, and things like that. So but once you have those personal projects in place, I think it's really important. But then you have something to actually start to showcase, right? So then once you have something to showcase, then you have the whole other set of challenges as a developer, especially self-taught, of interviewing, right? Interviewing has now become its own skill set. Like, there's books on interviewing, there's websites dedicated to interviewing for computer science. There's like things like HackerRank for stupid ass whiteboarding algorithms that the companies want to put people on the spot for in front of a room full of strangers and things like that. So those are unfortunately things that we have to learn, and I think that the quicker you're able to spend time on that, the better. But you shouldn't focus on that obviously before you have basics of programming in place and then some personal projects to be able to show off. But beyond that, like those are definitely the probably the best 3 pieces of advice I can give is simply learn something either from me or somebody else, and then start building those personal projects, and then practice interviewing as quickly as you can, because interviewing is going to be a nightmare. Half the places will be like this crazy process of building apps for them, and the other half might just be questions and things like that, which is what I prefer. But it's one of the crappier aspects, I think, of being a developer is trying to interview in this field. So another thing that working in an actual corporate environment is that there's no question that, you know, that in almost every success story you've ever heard about, if you think of anybody in like business or IT or whatever, everybody knows that you have to get, in order to get to a certain place, you know, people, you have to step on people, or you have to piss people off, and that happens full circle, right? So there's been times where I've worked with people I didn't get along with, that they either didn't like me or I didn't like them, our communication wasn't that great. There's a lot of territorial programmers is what I would call some people that have knowledge bases of certain projects, business, things like that. And they can be considered like gatekeepers. So having to deal with like gatekeepers and, you know, just conflicting personalities can be very, very difficult. Working across cultures, right? Computer science is a very multicultural thing. We have a lot of people in this industry that come from other places, like non-English speaking countries, not from the United States at all. You know, there's obviously that probably applies to every single different country, but you know, as an American, where you grow up like with American culture, the English language is your first language, and then you know you're working with a bunch of people that's not their first language, and that can happen in any industry, because that was like that with construction as well, when I did that. But you know, I think that actually helped me when it comes to communication with other programmers, because I had to communicate with a lot of different you know, non-native, non-English speaking people when I did construction, and I think that probably helped me a little bit with IT. But you will have that as well in IT. I mean, that is something that you just have, like, you know, sometimes you're like, what did they just say? Like, what? Like, but yeah, that's common. Another thing too is like with the theoretical stuff, like big O notation, stuff like that. A lot of things that they really pound and drill in computer science schools and things like that, you're not going to get that as a self-taught dev. And for the most part, when that wasn't really a lot, you know, even for older devs that didn't have to deal with a lot of that type of, a lot of those types of questions and things, they can still get tripped up even in this day and age. You can have a 15-year programmer that's going to be asked the same questions in the job interview process. So that's something that I think as a self-taught dev, you end up struggling with a little bit more than maybe other people. So then finally, the last thing I'll say on the imposter syndrome thing is that, like, that is like a common thing. When I first got into this industry, I thought that I was basically going to be surrounded by like what I thought was like the prototypical lab coat type of thick glasses, like nerds that like were just talking like in a language that I didn't understand. And when it comes to that rock star programmer status, like just like musicians or whatever else out there, or NFL athletes, or how many people play sports and how many people suck at it, right? Or how many people are just serviceable, right? And it's the same thing with coding, or even musicians. Like, everybody wants to pick up and play guitar. Like, I play guitar and I am terrible at it. But when it comes to programming, I don't have imposter syndrome to any sort of point where I'm like, I can't be a programmer, I can't be sufficient. Like, I know for a fact that I've made so much money in this industry so far that I know for a fact I can be a programmer. And I think eventually, like, you get to some point where you're like, well, certain people might accuse you of not being the best programmer, and there's going to be times where you're not going to be doing your best work. But also, as a senior dev, there's a certain point where you also know that that's the case, and you also know that there's more important things in life than, you know, constantly working all the time, really. So picking and choosing those technologies and you know, where to spend your time is one of the biggest challenges that I think I faced for many years getting into this industry. And now, like, I think I'm much more in tune and aware of, like, okay, I'm gonna really invest some significant time doing this and that, and like and these other things I might just gloss over, right? Because I do want to have a wide array of knowledge, and I think we all should, but there's certain things that you should probably pinpoint and be like, okay, because of this field that I'm in and where I feel like I'm going to be in 5 years, things like that, I'm going to be focusing on this, and this, and I might read about that and that, you know, these other things, but I'm just not going to, you know, I'm not going to have that be something that I have to, like, think about and start to, like, intertwine that all into, like, how I'm going to get my kids to their scheduling and, like, do this and that and all that stuff. That's something I should probably talk about more as well. Like, you're talking about a guy who has a 17-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old son, and raises both of those kids by myself. So, like, that is, that's something that I think I could talk about quite a bit. Like, I've been able to be quite successful in this field by working really, really hard And at the same time, I'm also a good father too. So I'll be the first to admit that, right? I'm just kidding. No, so I am a good father, but anyway, guys, that's really all I got in this video. But like, just perseverance. Don't listen to people when they say you can't do it. Everybody's gonna struggle. You're not gonna be good overnight. It's gonna take a long time. And ultimately, though, it's a good field to be in because we all have so many different opportunities to do whatever we want to do.